Hello and welcome to my channel for Vibrant Systems. My name is Danielle Hauk and my mission is to help people deepen their connection to self, to others, and to the environment. And if you found me on this video is part of a series called The Journey So Far, where I kind of document some of the most important lessons that I've encountered on my path as a business owner and consultant / community mentor, because it is a journey that asks for continuous growth and self-reflection in order for me to show up in a way that is both true and authentic to myself, but also meaningful for the people I work with. And in this particular video, I want to talk a lot about humility. Now, for those who hear humility and immediately associate it with shame, I do want to address the fact that that is not the kind of humility I am talking about, but rather I am talking about being humble in the sense of, yes, I know I have some incredible skills that I bring to my clients in the form of my writing expertise, my systems thinking background, my research skills. I do bring some, what I believe, very valuable skills to the table. But I need to be humble about the ways I'm ignorant about the dynamics in their community, the struggles they may face, and the local expertise that's also there. Humility in my role really means being honest and transparent about the gaps in my own knowledge, the places that I personally experience challenges, and how I am still learning every single day. That is what humility is. And working with communities, working with people, necessitates this kind of humility, but it's also not a characteristic or a value or a trait that's highly celebrated in Western culture. And by that I mean, when you're looking at marketing campaigns, it's not like Coca-Cola is being humble about, some people might like the taste of Coca-Cola and other people don't. They're not being humble. They're trying to convince you and persuade you that they are the best. Same thing with Pepsi. Same thing with Dr. Pepper. At the end of the day, we all know we have our own preferences, but the marketing is the opposite of humble. It's often arrogant. And arrogance, I had pointed out to me today by one of my, I think I can call her a mentor. I consider her a mentor. Sandy Boucher. I was speaking to her about perception and the roles that perception plays in how we prioritize certain things. And she reminded me that arrogance often is actually stemming from a place of fear, of this idea of, there are so many things I don't know, and that uncertainty, that ignorance is scary, because when we don't know what's going on, there's so many different things we can't control that we can't even see. And so our brain often tries to counteract that with the false sense of security that comes across as arrogance. And in my own path, I'm not going to say I've never been arrogant. I definitely have, because I'm human and we're all subject to the ways our brains are wired. And I think it's a pretty normal thing for our brains to be wired that way. But I was always pushed into, or at least I tried to at least hold myself accountable to, this place of humility. And not false humility, not pretending that I can't do anything, I don't have value, I'm nothing. I'm just a tiny little bug in the grand scheme of things. And yes, I do have a small role in the grand scheme of things, but false humility neglects to honor and appreciate the gifts that each of us has. And when I move forward in humility with my clients, I will share my perspective with courage and with strength and with, the reasoning that I come with to the table. But I'm also open to being told I'm wrong, being told that there's something I'm not seeing, or being told that the way I'm seeing things just doesn't work for the systems my clients are in. Because again, there are so many factors and power dynamics and structures that we're all operating in, but we all come to those places with a different perspective. Pardon Leo for being a little bit of a menace, but he's being a quiet menace, so he can stay for now. Maybe he won't be for long. Humility also, and this has been a theme that's kind of come up very strongly over the past couple of weeks for me. Humility is a value or trait. I don't technically know where it would fall on that. I think it could be any and all. But it is a way of being that opens the door for me to be self-reflective about the beliefs that I've been holding, about the values I've been practicing, about how I can actually, see if I can hold him, how I can actually continue to adjust and align to what feels more true and authentic to me. And this allows me to try a lot of things, right? If you've been following my journey at all, if you're not new to this video, then you may have already clocked the fact that I am someone who is spiritual. And finding my spirituality in a way that's detached from the religion I was raised in, Catholicism, but is also not appropriative of indigenous knowledge systems, but is also grounded enough in structures and systems and real world. It is hard to navigate because in many new age spiritual spaces, they are incredibly ungrounded. And there is a resistance to being self-reflective of the things or the systems that we live in. In many of these spaces, it is easier to question these systems and throw away decades of gathered knowledge, which is not perfect. Our research institutions are not perfect. But to look at those and to throw that gathered knowledge out the window because it doesn't fit the narrative you wish to be true is something that I had to be honest with myself is not aligned with my own values. I am both spiritual and grounded, and I do truly value the research we've gathered and also the systems in those institutions that allow us to continue to critique and address and diversify our knowledge systems. And this is also why, while I am working to be very conscious of any potential appropriation on my part, but why I really respect and value indigenous knowledge systems and ways of knowing and spiritual practices is because those practices are intergenerational. They're not something that was created in response to an institution that felt suffocating, which is, for me, why I left Catholicism. They're not created to reject something. They're created based on lived experience and knowledge of the land and generations of wisdom gathered from living in community. In my experience, from my perception, entering spaces that are identified as more New Age spirituality, they lack this grounded intergenerational wisdom or desire to look back and learn from the past in a way that is grounded, both to recognize in Canada where I live, the enduring effects of colonization on the breakdown of community structures, but also to be critical of things like capitalism and the way it creates division and spreads us apart, or the ways that historically our populations have been systematically de-skilled so that we're more and more reliant on market systems. An example that I can pull from my own professional experience is in the realm of food systems and food sovereignty. It was only about 3 generations ago that the norm was that, and I'm talking the norm for white people, settlers in Canada, for them to have their own gardens, process their own food, can it so that it was on their shelves, and they were responsible for keeping those shelves full. And that knowledge for many people has been lost. And I am very fortunate because my mom did a lot of the work when we moved out to the farm we live on. She did a lot of the work to relearn those processes. But it was to supplement our existence in the market system. I think another aspect of humility that this is bringing up for me right now is how important it is to recognize the validity of many different systems coexisting, because in the work I was doing with food sovereignty, we were talking about things like growing, like permaculture, like processing, saving food for the winter so that our local communities could be stronger in the face of system disruptions, which I was working with rural communities and Indigenous communities in this project. And for them, it is a real risk because the roads can be washed out, their crops can fail. There's usually only one grocery store, if there even is a grocery store, and that grocery store is often very expensive. And so food sovereignty in this way was incredibly critical. The expensive nature of food is also something we're seeing in cities now, thanks to inflation. And so there is a lot of value to this food sovereignty. But this food sovereignty wasn't hearkening back to some mythic past that never existed before. It wasn't suggesting that every single person should go back to hunting and foraging for their food. Some do, and I'm a big proponent for that, to do responsibly and in relationship with the land. I'm a big proponent for sourcing our food from the land, but it's not feasible for everybody, and I think on a grander scale, it's not feasible as a systemic food system shift. For the amount of people we need, we do have to rely on farming, and that does mean also relying on the global food system. And I think it takes a lot of humility to see the validity of not just our own perspective, but the complexity that creates the validity of other perspectives as well. Unfortunately, for many of us who have been raised in these Western systems and dynamics, we were not necessarily raised in a household that allowed for the validity of different perspectives. Oftentimes, as children, our own perceptions, which when you look at them, often were incredibly valid, are immediately shamed and silenced and overridden by our parents. And if this is what we grew up in, humility feels a lot more like shame than it does like authenticity. And I think this is a big part of why when we find a community that reflects our beliefs or that doesn't attach shame to a certain way of thinking, we cling to that community so tightly because we know what it was like to be in positions of being shamed for our perspective. And that shame, that emotional element, is so strong. but to truly be willing to critique and expand our perspectives requires an immense amount of humility regarding the things we don't know and the fact that we might be wrong. And I'm not saying we still won't do all that work of listening to other knowledge systems, doing real research as opposed to listening to the regurgitated conspiracy theories that are often in many spaces nowadays with the prevalence of social media. We can still do all that work and still decide that our beliefs are true and correct and right for us. And at the end of the day, I can't tell any single person that they should believe something differently. But I do want to encourage anybody who's watching this video and who's maybe resonating on some level with what I've been saying, I would like to encourage you to really practice leaning into that humility, especially when we're uncomfortable, especially when we're being asked to consider why we deem certain knowledge systems, intergenerational, decades-long knowledge systems, as untrustworthy or invalid. I think it's important to reflect on that and consider the ways in which maybe it's possible for that knowledge system to coexist with your beliefs. And that may mean recognizing that your beliefs weren't right, that maybe those beliefs do need to adjust or shift. And I think that's okay too, because that's part of being humble, is knowing that we have the opportunity to grow throughout our life. And I know for myself, in the work I do, in the way I try to show up, again, on that personal level, with my friends and family, with my clients, humility is such a cornerstone of that. And I'm not perfect. Like I said, I'm probably arrogant more times than I realize. But it is something I aspire to and actively, mindfully try to practice. So if you have stayed with me till the end of this video, thank you for your time. You can leave a comment below or follow for more videos like this. My Building Blocks for Community Building playlist has some critical nuggets, I think, for what it takes to build community in today's day and age. So I do hope you check that one out. Or if you're more on the stage of trying to build up the calm foundation for humility to actually ground and root, I also have a meditations playlist that you can access. My name's Danielle. Like I said, I run my company Vibrant Systems, and my entire mission in life is to help deepen grounded, authentic, and meaningful connections on that personal level, on that collective level, and to the world we live in around us. And to me, grounding that knowledge, my practices, the work I do in the knowledge systems that have been around for generations is a very critical part of the work I do. So thank you again. Please subscribe if you're called to, and let's make your story a vibrant one.